This video is sponsored by Yellow Mountain Imports, the premier Go supply center for North America. For a limited time, you can get a 10% discount on any Go-related product with the discount code Sente10. The link is in the description below. Happy playing! Hello everyone, Isn't Michaela here, and welcome to Chapter 3, The Stones Go Walking. This, for me, was one of the hardest chapters to get through. It felt very vague, and it was very, very short. And when I was first starting out, and I tried to read this book the first time, it was not very helpful for me. But as I've gotten stronger, I'm finding a lot of wisdom in Chapter 3, and I'm very, very much looking forward to sharing it with you all today. For those that are new to these videos, I am going through every chapter in the Fundamentals of Go, breaking it down, showing you the examples, giving you my interpretation of what it's trying to tell you, so you can watch these and get better at the fundamentals, get better at Go, and really supercharge your game. So be sure to look at the first video in this playlist for Chapter 1, as well as Chapter 2. We are doing Chapter 3 right now, which is called The Stones Go Walking. And this chapter is the prelude to what are the most important chapters in the book. Primarily, the struggle to get ahead is one of the biggest, I think, turning points in terms of paradigm shifts for Go. So I'm very, very excited to share it with you all and can't wait to get started. So as we get started here, what do we mean by the stones go walking? This chapter is kind of very vague. And it starts off with a very funny quote that I just want to read to you. It's the first sentence. Kageyama says, "Go is the kind of game in which you are an expert if you just keep on making ordinary moves." And then goes on to bash amateurs, saying, "Amateurs' moves are far from ordinary. I don't even know where to start with some of these amateurs' moves." And so the question, the central tenet to this question in this chapter is, how do you make an ordinary move? What is ordinary? What is outlandish? What is normal? What is expected? And in The Stones Go Walking, we start to address what a normal move is. So what do we mean by the stones go walking? Well, since the stones can move, you can't really walk them, but the groups that they make can walk. When stones come together and interact with each other, the groups themselves start to walk across the board. In simple walks like this, it creates josekis, it creates standard sequences, it creates situations where maybe one group has territory, one group has influence, maybe both groups are settled. There's some sort of clear exchange happening between the two groups. However, when the stones are out of step, or when you abandon a position before the walk is completed, your opponent can take advantage of that for a huge, huge, huge advantage. Take this walk, and I'm going to show this walk again. Black pincers, white pops up, black walks with white, white pushes, and then comes back to pincer the black stone to start an attack. This is a standard walk. White is out, black has secure territory, white has come back to attack this black stone, nothing is dead yet, and there is relatively clear benefit for both sides. However, oftentimes we will see amateurs abandon the walk. Knowing how the stones go walking is really all about knowing when to tanuki from a position and how to deal with stones fighting in close quarters. Let's say that black didn't want to get pincered here. Let's say black was getting scared of white's giant wall, and so decides to abandon this walk by extending out this way. White now has the ability to Hane and then double Hane and create this formation, completely crunching black into a corner and having a very large, radiating, powerful thickness across the board. And remember, in our previous chapter, we talked about how important it was to not get your group separated. Black playing this way, extending out from the pincered stone instead of completing the walk with white, is one of the primary ways that stones can get out of step. And when the stones get out of step, usually one side can take advantage of that, just like white did here. Rather than continuing the walk, black tanukied, and white was able to completely surround black's position. And amateurs might not be able to understand why this is so good for white. But trust me, it is incredibly good for white. Not only is black making significantly less points now than they were before, not only does white have amazing follow-ups here and here to crunch black's group even further, not only could white still maybe even attack with a good developing move and pincer these two black stones, but black's groups are disconnected. And this surround, this turn, this well-timed turn, is so, so important. I can't tell you how many games I've played where turning at the right time or taking advantage of my opponent nuking away from a walk that we've done has given me such a huge advantage in my game. Kagayama actually recommends laying this board position out every day and telling yourself mantra style, white's thickness is superior. White's thickness is superior until you internalize this lesson. I know it might not look that way. It might be cool to have this extra stone, but from the perspective of keeping the groups connected and keeping groups from getting isolated, this is perfect for black. This is totally acceptable for black. You might ask, well, if that's the case, then why doesn't white continue to push? Right? If we're doing the walking, how do you know when to stop? That's an amazing question. And it's a little bit of an ambiguous answer. And I think as we continue through this book, the reasons will become clear. One reason why white should not continue to keep pushing along this line is that white is pushing from behind. When you push from behind, you're never going to get ahead of black, which means you're never going to be able to crunch black down and do that Hane trick like we showed before. Pushing from behind is generally a poor strategy in the long term. In this instance, white pushed from behind just enough to get out and then counterattack. And this is an acceptable even Joseki result for both sides. So while it's not good for black to abandon this, it makes sense after a few moves for white to stop the walk and continue to focus its attention on the other side of its group. Now I want to take a break from going through the book and just talk about an example of my own. I want to add a little bit of clarity to what we're talking about. I think it can really help the lesson. And that's sort of deciding, when you're supposed to leave the walk versus when it's too valuable and you should keep walking with your opponent in these sorts of lines. And a lot of it comes down to Haneing at the head of 2 or 3 stones. So let's take this example. Should black abandon this position at A? Should black continue to walk, or should black go somewhere else? Well, if you guessed black should continue to walk, you are correct. Black should absolutely continue to step for at least 2 more stones. The reason is because of the double Hane. So let's say black abandons. White can Hane, just like we saw in that previous diagram in the fundamentals of Go. Black's going to Hane, white's going to double Hane. Now what happens, even if black tries to cut here, black can't really do much, right? Black has to come back and defend this, and white can continue to build a giant wall. If black tries to get a little too over-aggressive and double Hane with white, then white gets this double Atari. I can either take this stone or take this stone, both of which would be disastrous for black. If black wants to Hane this way, it doesn't quite work because we still have this double Hane here. And now black stones are completely disconnected, and this is a disastrous result. So Hane at the head of 2 and 3 is so powerful, it allows whatever side is doing the Haneing to get a huge, huge turn advantage on the opponent. Being able to completely sideline a group and constrain it to the side radiates power in every direction from the attacker. This whole thing is radiating power. And that is why Haneing at the head of 2 or 3 is so powerful, and that's a huge part of the reason why in this situation here, it was so important to continue pushing. Because if black abandoned to secure this group, then white gets the double Hane, and then things get really, really dicey. Black has to do something weird like this, and This will radiate power to disrupt black's territory, to make white's own territory, to attack these two groups. It is very, very strong. So I hope this made a little bit of sense as to when to stop the walk in a straight line situation. But let's talk more about walks. Let's see how the stones go walking in other fights. So when we were walking in straight lines, we learned about the power of turning around on your opponent and enabling the double Hane. Now we're going to learn how stones can go walking in fighting shapes and things that aren't just straight lines. So black is deciding to pincer this white stone here. White is going to respond with a shoulder hit. Black is going to cover this white stone. White's going to descend. Black descends. White continues to put pressure, and black has to smother and protect black stones. Most people, when they're looking at this, would say, okay, cool, that's a very standard looking thing. I don't see anything particularly wrong with this. But Kageyama says that black's response is completely overly passive and disregards the rules with which stones should walk. So let's try to dissect a little bit about what he means and figure out a better way we could have done this. So let's take it back to this initial shoulder hit. In general, when you get shoulder hit, you really should respond in either direction A or direction B. The reason is because you're giving your stone extra strength and maximizing the liberties of your group with respect to your opponent's attack. Responding to a shoulder hit with a similar move like that is more powerful than simply backing off and, in this case, doing a diagonal. But why? Why is that? Why? You know what I mean? Why is that fundamentally so much better with the fundamentals of Go? Well, for a few reasons. One, when you attach here, if white does anything else, you have this turn, which is incredibly powerful. It maximizes black's liberties. It attacks this white group. Black can continue to push. And all of a sudden, you've maximized your liberties on this group. You can jump out. You can attack. You can do a lot of different things from this position. Getting 3 stones to 1 on your opponent's shape is incredibly, incredibly powerful from a fundamental perspective. The second reason is if you back off in another way like this and white descends like they did in the game, this is exposing a very critical shape point here, which is point A. If black covers like this and white Hanes at point A, black cannot block because this is an Atari. Right? And now black stone is captured, and black is completely undercut. So no matter which way you slice it, this formation here has a lot of weaknesses. Here and here. Has a lot of weaknesses for this black shape. And by enacting this diagonal, black exposed a lot of those weaknesses. So black has to play here to defend white playing a K18 and starting that Hane variation. White gets to now threaten coming out and surrounding at the same time. And black has to cover. And we can see that in this kind of situation, it feels like black got a little bit bullied around. You get the sense that black got bullied. When you really look at the shape and how these forcing moves happened, and black had to respond to all of them in kind of a meek way. So if that's the case, given what we know, is there a better way for these stones to go walking? Well, as you can probably have guessed, after this, black has to push out. Now, what happens if white plays here? What is black's best move? How would black keep the stones walking? And how would black protect their shape in the best way, given everything that we've learned? So a lot of folks might think, oh, well, to keep walking, we should keep moving in the same direction. So we should Hane here. However, Hane here is a mistake. After white descends here, creating shape for their group, exposing this weak point here at J16, black has to defend, and black is a little bit crunched. White got this extra forcing move in for free, the base is strong, and white can continue on the attack at B, or be super aggressive with J14, or connect solidly at L15. Here also fails, because when white descends, we're seeing the same problem here at K18, where if black tries something like this is an Atari, and then black is undercut. So it seems like every variation we're choosing, this descent at L17 is the critical point for this shape. And sometimes when the stones go walking, it's important to understand when you need to step backwards and fill in the space your opponent left behind. Sometimes you walk with them, and sometimes you walk around them and play a move that you might be starting to understand why it's so important. And that is L17. L17 is the right move. It's threatening a cut point at A. It's threatening to extend at B. It's threatening to Hane at C. And it's expanding all of the liberties of Black's group over here. White needs to step back from here to protect all of these cutting points. Now Black can go back and completely remove the Aji of this group. The difference between this shape, and this shape cannot be overstated. This extra forcing move got Black out at L17, completely protected White from other forcing moves. It's allowing Black the opportunity to, and later on in the game, continue pushing. It's giving Black other forcing moves that are ripe for connection. It's giving Black a tiger's mouth if they extend. It's threatening a lot of things for Black. And White needs to make sure that they don't let this group get in any more danger. However, in a different situation, let's say White played here, Black defends, and then White plays here. Well, in this case, this diagonal is a great move. The reason is because this L16 stone does not exist, which means that White can't descend to L17 and create that Aji. That is that K18 shape abuse that we have been talking about before. White stones are more far away. They're giving Black more breathing room, and now Black can feel free to walk and remove the Aji of H17 at their leisure without necessarily compromising the shape of their group. If White tries, White is probably just going to fail. So we can see that the neighboring stones make a huge difference in which way the stones are supposed to walk. And that's one of the most confusing things about this chapter. And that's where experience sort of comes into play. It's very difficult to understand all of the situations a priori. You kind of got to play around with them and figure it out for yourself. However, there's a lot of commonalities between all of these situations. And once you learn them, your game is going to be really, really supercharged. And I hope that this was like good first step. So let's continue with some more examples before we close out the video. This chapter was so short. I think it's the shortest chapter in the whole book at like 10 pages. So let's say we're given this situation and White goes here. What is Black's best move to keep the stones walking in the proper way? Well, if you're sort of picking up on our discussions, you'll know that responding to the shoulder hit is the best thing to do. We should not ignore this move. And in this case, it's a very natural, simple progression. Here, here, here is a completely fine and normal progression of steps for the stones. Even beginners can sort of understand when a position calls to be responded to. And usually the most intuitive moves are kind of for the most part correct. But the subtleties in maybe 1 point off or 1 point difference can be very, very important as you get better at the game. Now let's deal with crosscuts, the dreaded walk with crosscuts. Let's say White plays here. A lot of folks might be scared and would back off here. However, this is giving White way too much ground, crunching Black shape, and is no way to walk your stones, according to Kageyama. The correct answer here is the crosscut. And a lot of players might be scared of the crosscut, but it's important to dissect what exactly happens when White plays here so you know your options. Generally, in the crosscut, you either extend from a direction or Hane. Extending is the strongest play to maximize your liberties on whichever side you are extending from. Extending also threatens ladders on whichever side you leave behind. So in this case, if Black extends from this side, that is threatening a ladder on the stone. Remember from our first fundamentals, if White ignores, then Black does this, and White is basically captured. So White has to respond. But what's the best way? Well, if White goes here, that might be trouble, because White has a lot of weaknesses in this shape and a lot of cut points. A, B, C. If white defends at A, black's going to capture the R16 stone. If white defends here, black is going to activate the ladder again with an Atari here. Atari, 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 and of course the capture. So this move fails too. Black is just going to play here and will be fine no matter what happens. If white pushes this way, we still get the same situation. Black can actually turn here first and then activate this ladder and completely capture the entire group. If white connects again, black takes here. So we can see that extending is a very, very strong move because it threatens a lot of cut points with your opponent's crosscut. That's why having the first move is very, very, very good most of the time. If black were to try to extend in this direction, that wouldn't be as good because now white gets this Atari and can disconnect. And now all of a sudden, white is connecting up to this other stone, and it's not great. Haneing a stone in the crosscut is usually not the best way to do things, because when you do that, you're forcing your opponent to become stronger and creating more cut points for yourself. We see that black tries to Hane here and follow up. This is an Atari, and this is an Atari, and white is in great, great shape. If black tries to Hane this way, and then here white simply can just descend, and no matter which one black defends, white has a ladder of their own. So cross-cutting generally should result in one person getting the inside, one person getting the outside, and usually a sacrificial stone in some way, shape, or form. However, if you play the crosscut wrong, you could end up with a much worse shape than your opponent. So it's really important to try to study crosscuts to figure out the best way. But just because the crosscuts are complicated, that does not mean you should be afraid of them. You should not give ground with Q17 if your opponent attaches to your stones. But as we mentioned in Chapter 1 of the Fundamentals, reading is paramount, so it's always important to get practice crosscuts and get practice reading so you know what to do in these types of situations. There are certain situations where players and beginners want to play really solid moves. So they do stuff like this. But this is an example of mistaking solidity for passivity. And this is a passive move. It looks solid, but it's passive. Black does not need to do this. Black can get more if they simply Hane. And knowing which ones are passive, which ones are weak, and which ones are strong is the essence of the walking stones. Let's take another example where black's stones are pincered, and black has a double approached corner. This is a little bit weird. They're high double approaches, so it's not the standard low double approach like we're used to seeing. But what is the best way? What would you say would be the best move for black in this situation? If you remember from our fundamentals of staying connected, we know that keeping white disconnected is the most important thing you can do. These moves look a little bit like they're not doing anything, but they're keeping white stones disconnected, which is actually the strongest play that you can make. What you don't want to do is try to make some sort of like sad little life for yourself in the corner here. That is absolutely not the way you want to live your life. Because white will get connected. There's still shape things that black can abuse here. White will get more thickness. And this corner won't be as big as you think it is. So it's really important to keep white disconnected in this situation. White has a lot of problems. If white defends one, black will take the other. The last topic in the Stones Go Walking, as we've mentioned, is how it's during situations where you abandon your group or abandon the walk too early to do something else. So let's say white invades here and black plays here. Of course, the natural walk is for white to maintain disconnection and strengthen this group. But let's say black is worried about a cross pincer, so black protects their stones here. This is not the best way for the stones to walk. Because black made an exchange, this exchange at A, for B, but did not follow it up with anything. You could think about it in a different way. Playing this exchange and then leaving it would be the same thing as having this exchange already in place and having black just play here straight out of the gate. I don't think anyone would choose to, in this situation, play this contact move here and give white the first move to abuse the shape. However, that is what that result ultimately ends up being. So it's important to know when you make these sort of shoulder hit exchanges to at least follow it up with some sort of solid move that will help keep your stones from getting abused in their shape before you come back here. So Kageyama finishes up with some old, outdated Josekis, but I don't feel like it would be useful really in going through them. You can go through them yourself in the book if you so choose. I think some of the major points here in this chapter, as short and kind of abstract and just kind of random as it was, is the importance of not leaving an exchange or not leaving a walk and recognizing the value in following up on an opponent that has abandoned their walk, right? This type of situation is so, so strong. And if you recognize the power in the double Hane and recognize the power in the well-timed turns, let's say white does this too early and black gets this well-timed turn here, this is so, so strong. It could change the entire course of the game. And so when you're learning about the stones go walking, you need to understand that if you misstep or you abandon your thing too early or you stay too late, that can actually have big consequences on the rest of the game. And that's something you really need to sort of learn and be cognizant of. And some great principles for helping you through that are watching out for Hanes at the head of 2 and 3 stones and making sure those are covered like that. The other example that is very important is learning where your critical shape points are for both you and your opponent, and understanding how best to walk your stones such that you're exposing the shape points for your opponent in the most efficient way before you go back and cover any weaknesses that you potentially have. And then lastly, understanding that in different situations, the moral of the story can change. Like we said here, if white gave black stones a little more breathing room, this becomes a wonderful move that removes Aji from H17, keeps blacks from disconnecting white stones. It's a good move. But if you take that move in another situation, it becomes a very bad move because it's allowing weak points in the shape to occur. So some general principles are, if you get shoulder hit by your opponent, make sure you respond solidly and respond by either. And the last principle is just don't confuse solidity with passivity. Make sure that when you walk your stones, you're not giving up too much just to play solid. Continue that reading. Remember in chapter 1, we said reading is so, so important. Continue that love of reading and making sure that, you're not afraid of crosscuts. You're not afraid of stepping your stones in a way that gives you the most. And it's something that you really need to do practice with as you play this game. But I can tell you the rewards are really, really, really great. After I've read this chapter, I started really abusing some of the key turning points when my opponents missed their walk and their stones got out of step. And you just develop an intuition for it, and it becomes incredibly, incredibly useful. So I really hope that you enjoyed this chapter. It was a little short, it was a little confusing, but I promise you the struggle to get ahead, which is chapter 4, is one of the coolest chapters in the book. And I'm so, so excited to get started on it. Get ready, get psyched, because it's going to be so fun. So have a great day. Remember to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And good luck in your games. I'll see you next time.